Maya Johnson sat at her desk, tapping her pencil nervously as the bell rang to signal the start of class at Lincoln West Middle School. It was a typical school morning in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Students filled the classroom with chatter about the latest episode of a popular TV show or the game they had watched the night before. But Maya wasn't thinking about any of that. While her classmates were concerned with the usual distractions of middle school life, Maya had something else on her mind. Maya's world didn't revolve around video games or social media like most kids her age. Her weekends were spent waking up before dawn to help her father, Marcus Johnson, on their small family farm. Her father ran a successful farm that produced soybeans, corn, and raised a small herd of cattle. Their land stretched across acres of fertile soil, but it wasn't just a business, it was a legacy passed down from her grandfather, Ezekiel Bryant, who had built an empire through hard work and smart investments. Unlike the other kids at school, Maya knew the ins and outs of farming in a way that most couldn't comprehend. She had been taught by her father to rotate crops, maintain irrigation systems, and predict weather patterns based on subtle changes in the air. She loved the work, loved the land, and loved being a part of something much bigger than herself. Farming wasn't just their livelihood, it was part of who they were. But today, none of that seemed to matter as she walked into Ms. Jessica Miller's 7th grade science class. Ms. Miller was a strict, no-nonsense teacher with a reputation for being tough on students. Maya had never had a problem with her before, but today felt different. Today, Maya knew something wasn't right. Ms. Miller started the lesson by handing out worksheets. "All right, class, we're going to dive into a unit on American agriculture," she announced, her voice cutting through the low hum of the classroom. "I've attached a worksheet and we'll be discussing some of the farming techniques that have shaped our nation." Maya skimmed through the worksheet as Ms. Miller began to lecture about farming practices in the U.S. Her eyes narrowed as she read over the section on soil rotation. The textbook stated that traditional farming techniques like crop rotation were becoming obsolete, replaced by modern industrial methods. Maya knew that wasn't true, not for her family. They rotated crops every season to maintain soil health, using techniques that had been passed down through generations. Her frustration built as Miss Miller continued, claiming that small farms were being phased out by corporate agriculture. Maya knew that wasn't the case either. Her family was living proof that small farms could thrive with modern techniques and hard work. She couldn't stay quiet. "Ms. Miller," Maya raised her hand. Ms. Miller paused and looked at her, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "Yes, Maya?" "That's not really true," Maya said, her voice steady but firm. "My family runs a small farm, and we use modern technology like GPS-guided tractors, drones, and soil sensors. We still rotate our crops, and it's not obsolete. It's more important now than ever." The class fell silent, a few students turning to look at Maya. Some of them smirked, while others whispered among themselves. Ms. Miller, however, just laughed, a dismissive sound that sent a chill through Maya's chest. "Maya, I appreciate your input, but I think I'll trust the experts who wrote the textbook," Ms. Miller replied, a condescending tone slipping into her voice. "But the textbook is wrong," Maya insisted, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're using cutting-edge technology, and small farms aren't going anywhere." Ms. Miller's expression hardened. "Maya, I suggest you follow the lesson. If you have concerns, we can talk about them after class." "But this is the truth," Maya shot back, her heart racing. "How can I just sit here and pretend everything in the textbook is right when it's not?" Ms. Miller's face turned red. "You're being disruptive. If you can't respect the lesson, maybe you should leave." The room fell deathly silent. Maya stood, her hands trembling as she grabbed her backpack. As she walked toward the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just about the lesson anymore. It was about something bigger. She wasn't just challenging her teacher's lesson. She was challenging the very idea that her truth, her family's truth, didn't matter. As the door shut behind her, the hallway stretched out before her, filled with the sound of her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. Maya's chest tightened as she tried to shake off the sting of Ms. Miller's words. She wasn't just a student in this classroom. She was the daughter of farmers, and she was proud of that. No one was going to make her feel small for standing up for what was right. Maya's feet dragged as she walked down the hallway toward the principal's office. The polished floor beneath her sneakers seemed to stretch on forever. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her as she passed by the classrooms. The whispers and stares of her classmates thick in the air. Some of them were amused, others curious, and a few had the same expression of disbelief Maya felt herself. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? She hadn't meant to cause a scene in class. She only wanted to correct what she saw as an injustice, something that undermined her family's hard work. But now she was walking to the principal's office, feeling more and more like she was the one who had done something wrong. Her hands tightened around the straps of her backpack, her jaw clenched as the door to Principal Ronald Carter's office came into view. Inside the office, Maya found Mrs. Lewis, the secretary, typing away at her computer. She barely glanced up as Maya stepped inside. "Take a seat, Maya," Mrs. Lewis said without missing a beat. Maya didn't answer, just sank into one of the chairs across from the principal's door, her knees bouncing anxiously. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure what had just happened. How could she have been wrong for speaking up? How could Miss Miller and the principal dismiss her so easily, as though her family's way of life didn't matter? A few minutes later, the door creaked open, and Principal Carter appeared. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair, his face etched with years of experience. He gestured for her to come inside, his expression unreadable. "Come on in, Maya," he said, his voice calm but firm. Maya stood and walked into the office, her stomach churning. She sat down in one of the chairs in front of the principal's desk, her hands still trembling. Principal Carter took his time to sit down, his eyes assessing her with a mix of curiosity and authority. "Maya, what's going on?" he asked, his voice measured. She didn't hold back. "I was just telling the truth," she said, her voice firm but shaking. "Ms. Miller's lesson was wrong. She said small farms are disappearing, but that's not true. My family's farm is thriving, and we're using modern technology to make it work." Principal Carter rubbed his temples, his sigh heavy. "I understand that you may have some concerns, Maya, but there's a time and place for that kind of discussion. In a classroom setting, you need to respect the teacher's authority, especially in front of your peers." "I wasn't trying to disrespect anyone," Maya said, her voice rising slightly. "I was just telling the truth. Why is it okay for her to teach things that aren't true?" The principal paused, taking a deep breath. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused on Maya. "Maya, I'm not saying you're wrong, but there's a way to handle these things. When you challenge a teacher in front of the class, it disrupts the learning environment. You have to follow the rules no matter what." Maya's frustration boiled over. "So I'm supposed to just sit there and let her teach lies? That's not right." "Maya," Principal Carter said, his voice growing more stern, "I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. If you can't respect the classroom, then I'm afraid I'll have to suspend you for the rest of the day." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. Suspended? For standing up for what was right? Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. She wasn't a troublemaker. She didn't yell. She didn't disrespect anyone. She was simply trying to correct the record. But now here she was, sitting in the principal's office, being told that speaking the truth wasn't enough. That wasn't how the world worked. That wasn't how things were supposed to be. "I'm not leaving," Maya said, her voice firm, though her stomach turned. "I'll take the suspension, but this isn't over." Principal Carter's expression hardened. "Maya, this isn't about fairness. It's about structure. It's about making sure the rules are followed." Maya opened her mouth to argue but stopped. She knew it wouldn't do any good. She was up against a system that wouldn't see things her way, a system that didn't value the truth of her family's experiences. With a final frustrated sigh, she stood up, grabbed her backpack, and walked out of the office. Her head held high, but her heart heavy. The hallway stretched out before her once again. But this time, she didn't feel like she belonged here anymore. The air felt thick with injustice. She wasn't the problem, but it sure felt like she was the one who was being punished for trying to do the right thing. Maya's mind raced as she walked out of the principal's office, her heart heavy with confusion and anger. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, each step further distancing her from the classroom she'd left behind. The hallway was quiet, the other students in their classrooms, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their reach. She didn't care. Nothing felt right anymore. She had spoken up for the truth, and now she was being punished for it. As she passed the classroom doors, she felt the weight of the whispers following her, the stares of classmates who would never understand. Some of them had probably never even stepped foot on a real farm. They had no idea what it was like, the struggle of keeping a small farm afloat in a world that was more and more dominated by big corporations. She wasn't asking for their sympathy, but she had hope for respect. Instead, all she had gotten was ridicule and punishment. When Maya stepped outside, the warmth of the Louisiana sun hit her face, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. Her mother, Tamara Johnson, was already parked by the curb in her old, reliable car. She sat behind the wheel, her face unreadable. As Maya approached the car, she could see her mother's hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. Tamara didn't say anything as Maya climbed into the passenger seat, the silence between them thick and heavy. It wasn't the angry silence of a fight, but the quiet of disappointment. Maya hated that look in her mother's eyes. "What happened?" Tamara asked finally, her voice quiet but laced with concern. Maya stared out the window, her chest tight. She had wanted to explain, but the words didn't come. How could she explain the frustration of being dismissed, of being made to feel small for speaking up? How could she explain that the truth she had tried to share was treated like a disruption? "They suspended me," Maya said flatly, "for correcting Miss Miller." Tamara's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What do you mean correcting her?" "I told her the textbook was wrong," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "I told her small farms aren't disappearing. My family's farm is doing fine. We're using new technology. We're not just surviving, we're thriving." Tamara glanced at Maya, her eyes softening with understanding. "And she didn't like that?" "No," Maya replied bitterly. "She just said I was disrupting the class, told me to leave. Now I'm suspended." For a long moment, the car was silent, save for the hum of the engine. Tamara's face remained calm, but Maya could tell she was thinking deeply. After a while, her mother exhaled slowly and spoke, her voice steady but full of concern. "This isn't about just the farm, Maya," Tamara said, her eyes focused on the road. "This is about more than just one disagreement. You have to understand that?" Maya looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" Tamara hesitated before speaking again. "You're not just challenging a teacher. You're challenging an entire system. A system that doesn't like it when people like you speak up, especially when you know more than they do." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying it's because of me being me?" Tamara gave a small, frustrated sigh. "I'm saying there's a reason teachers don't like to hear from students like you. You're a girl, and you're black. And sometimes people have a harder time accepting that you know something they don't." Maya swallowed, her chest tightening. She had always known there were differences between her and her classmates, but hearing it out loud from her mother made it more real than ever. It wasn't just about being smart or knowledgeable. It was about who she was, about the history she carried with her. The words stung, but they also fueled something deep inside her. She wasn't just going to let this go. She wasn't going to sit back and let people silence her just because they didn't like what she had to say. As they pulled into their driveway, Maya could see her father, Marcus, standing on the porch, his arms crossed. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and tough from years of working the land. Maya knew he didn't get angry easily, but when he did, people listened. Tamara parked the car, and they both got out, walking toward Marcus. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at his daughter with an unreadable expression. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. Maya hesitated before speaking. "They suspended me. Ms. Miller didn't like that I challenged her in class." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And you told her the truth?" "Yeah," Maya replied. "I told her the truth, that small farms are still important and that they can thrive if you use the right tools and knowledge." Tamara gave her husband a quick glance before responding. The issue isn't just that Maya spoke up. It's about how she was treated because of it. Marcus's eyes flashed with something dark. He exhaled sharply, his frustration evident. "I'll handle it," he muttered, but Maya could see the fire burning in his eyes. She knew what he meant. Before he could turn to walk inside, Maya's grandfather, Ezekiel Bryant, appeared from the porch. He was a tall man with a presence that could make anyone stop and listen. His silver beard and sharp gaze were a testament to a lifetime of hard work and experience. He had never been one to back down from a fight, and Maya could see the look in his eyes now. He wasn't going to let this go. Maya's stomach flipped. She had no doubt that if Ezekiel decided to intervene, this situation was about to escalate in a big way. Maya could feel the tension in the air as her grandfather, Ezekiel Bryant, stepped down from the porch toward them. He was a man who didn't need to say much to command respect. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a silver beard neatly trimmed and his clothes always pressed perfectly, Ezekiel carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people stand a little straighter when he was around. He didn't make a habit of getting involved in petty matters, but when it came to family, especially when someone had crossed a line, there was no one more protective. Maya's father, Marcus, didn't need to say anything. He just looked at his father with the same mix of respect and understanding that had passed down from one generation to the next. It was clear that Ezekiel was going to handle things his way. "Tell me what happened," Ezekiel said, his voice calm but commanding. Maya took a deep breath and explained the situation. She told him about the classroom, about Ms. Miller's dismissive attitude, about the textbook's errors, and how she had stood up for her family's farm. She talked about the suspension and how Principal Carter hadn't even tried to listen to her side of the story. The words spilled out in a rush, the anger and frustration that had been simmering inside her finally finding release. When she finished, Ezekiel stood still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the ground as if he were weighing every word she had said. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked toward his car. Maya followed him, confused. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" Ezekiel didn't answer right away, but when he reached his sleek, black luxury sports car, he turned to her with a glint of determination in his eyes. "I'm going to take care of this," he said simply. Maya's heart raced. She had never seen her grandfather like this. So determined, so sure of himself. He had always been calm and collected, never one for grand gestures. But something about this situation, something about the way Maya had been treated, had clearly struck a nerve. As Ezekiel slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, the sound of the car's powerful motor roared to life, a deep, throaty hum that resonated in Maya's chest. She hesitated for a moment, looking at her parents, but both Marcus and Tamara nodded, silently giving their blessing. Maya climbed into the passenger seat and buckled in, her thoughts spinning. She didn't know what her grandfather had planned, but she knew it wasn't going to be quiet. The drive to Lincoln West Middle School was quick, the car cutting through the streets with ease. Maya glanced out the window, her mind still racing with what had just happened. She couldn't shake the feeling that her family had always had to fight harder than others just to be seen, just to be heard. But now, with Ezekiel at the wheel, it felt like the fight was about to take a new direction. As they neared the school, Maya noticed how people were beginning to notice the car. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. People turned their heads as the black sports car rolled down the road, the engine's growl echoing in the still afternoon air. Maya felt a mix of awe and unease. She had never seen her grandfather take such a bold step before. He was a man who got things done, quietly and with precision, but now it was clear that this wasn't going to be a quiet matter. When they pulled into the parking lot of the school, Maya saw students and staff walking around, most of them oblivious to what was about to happen. But the moment Ezekiel parked the car, everything seemed to freeze. Heads turned as they saw the luxury sports car and its distinguished driver step out. Maya couldn't help but notice the way some of the students stared in shock, the way they whispered to each other, wondering who this was and why he was here. Ezekiel stood tall, his presence undeniable. Maya stepped out of the car beside him, her heart racing. She had no idea what to expect, but she was certain of one thing. This wasn't going to be a typical meeting with the principal. Ezekiel adjusted his cufflinks, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Stay close, Maya," he said quietly. "Let me handle this." As they walked toward the school's entrance, Maya felt her stomach flip. The air seemed to grow heavier with every step. People were beginning to take notice, some students pulling out their phones to snap pictures. It felt like the entire school was watching them. Maya could hear whispers of excitement and curiosity behind her, but she didn't care. She walked beside her grandfather with a steady, determined stride. When they reached the main doors of the school, Ezekiel didn't hesitate. He didn't knock, didn't wait to be let in. He simply walked in as if he owned the place, his footsteps purposeful and confident. The security guards, who were used to seeing parents shuffle in quietly, froze as Ezekiel passed them without a word. No one dared to stop him. Maya followed him inside, trying to control her racing thoughts. She had never seen her grandfather so focused, so resolute. It was clear he wasn't here just to talk. He was here to make a statement. Ezekiel Bryant's presence was felt the moment he stepped into the school. His movements were deliberate, his posture straight, and every eye in the hallway seemed to follow him. Maya walked a few paces behind him, the quiet hum of the building now replaced with the sound of their footsteps. Her grandfather had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. When they reached Principal Ronald Carter's office, Ezekiel didn't hesitate. He walked straight through the door, his eyes immediately locking onto Carter. The principal, caught off guard, stood up from behind his desk. "Mr. Bryant," Principal Carter said, his tone a bit wary, "what brings you here today?" Ezekiel didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "I'm here because my granddaughter, Maya, was suspended for telling the truth in your classroom." The words hit like a thunderclap. Carter blinked, clearly startled, but Ezekiel wasn't done. "Maya challenged misinformation. She didn't disrupt the class for no reason. She corrected an error, and instead of listening, you punished her." Principal Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I understand you're upset, but Maya's behavior was disruptive. She ignored the lesson and spoke out of turn." "Disruptive?" Ezekiel's voice was low, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Your classroom is a place for students to learn, to think critically. You didn't like that Maya thought for herself, that she had the courage to question what was being taught. That's not disruption, that's education." Maya stood still behind her grandfather, her eyes wide. She had never seen Ezekiel so intense. He wasn't yelling, but his words carried a weight that seemed to demand the truth be heard. The principal didn't know how to respond. "You see, Maya comes from a family that works the land, that builds things with their hands," Ezekiel continued. "Her father, my son, runs a small farm. And yes, we're proud of that. Maya knows how to farm. She's learned the real-world skills that textbooks can't teach you. And when she tells you that the textbook is wrong, you should listen." Principal Carter's face reddened, his jaw tightening. "Maya has to learn that there's a time and place for challenging authority," he said, trying to hold on to control of the situation. "Authority?" Ezekiel's eyes narrowed. "You're confusing authority with arrogance. You didn't correct Maya because she was wrong. You corrected her because it made you uncomfortable. She told the truth and you didn't like it." Carter opened his mouth to speak, but Ezekiel held up his hand, stopping him cold. "I'm not here for a debate," Ezekiel said. "I'm here because Maya deserves an apology. She deserves to go back to class without this suspension hanging over her head. And you," he gestured to the principal, "you need to remember who you're here to serve. This is about more than just a classroom lesson. It's about fairness and respect and giving our children the chance to speak their truths, especially when they know more than you." Maya watched, stunned, as her grandfather dismantled Principal Carter's arguments one by one. There was no shouting, no threats, just a calm, relentless demand for justice. Carter shifted in his seat, looking like he was being weighed down by Ezekiel's words. After a long silence, he sighed. "Fine," Carter said reluctantly. "I'll clear Maya's suspension. She can return to class tomorrow with no record of this incident. But," he paused, "I still think there needs to be more respect for authority in the classroom." Ezekiel raised an eyebrow, then gave a small smile. "You're getting there," he said, his voice still calm but firm. "But this is about more than respect. It's about learning how to listen, even when it's hard." With that, Ezekiel turned to Maya, his expression softening. "Let's go, Maya. You've made your point." As they walked out of the office, Maya's heart felt lighter than it had all day. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Her grandfather had not only stood up for her, but had made it clear that this wasn't just about one suspension. It was about making sure the truth was always valued, no matter who said it. When they walked out of the school, the atmosphere felt different. Students who had been watching with curiosity and surprise were now whispering among themselves, some nodding in approval. Maya's grandfather had made sure that his message had been heard loud and clear. As Ezekiel led her back to the car, Maya realized something. This wasn't just about her. It was about every student who had ever been silenced for speaking up. And now they would know that they didn't have to stay silent anymore.